So first of all, we are going to build molecules. If you remember back to 6th grade, hopefully I know you talked about periodic table, you talked about atoms. A molecule is a fancy word for a group of atoms that have bonded together. So we're going to build some of those today using Tutti Fruities as our atoms. So before you start, the first thing I need you to do is count out these specific atoms. You need 6 carbon, we're going to use red, 18 green for oxygen, and 12 purple, or you could use blue if you don't have enough purple, for hydrogen. Okay? No, don't use the broken ones. Now, if you're missing a couple of these things, let me know. I can come and get you the things that you need. Oh, you need a ton of green. So go ahead and get those sorted out. The rest of the colors of Fruit Loops, feel free to eat them. Keep your atom building, your molecule building atoms at the top. So your green, your red, and your purple. Keep those at the top. The rest of the atoms, Tutti Fruities, can be pushed to the side and eaten.
Fair enough. Guys, it makes kind of like cheese and crackers. I'm like a chameleon.
Ah!
He's a giraffe.
All right, let's get going. Do the best you can. Also, I'll post the video later, so you can, if you need to see it again, you can. And everything I'm going to be explaining, people, you have in front of you, I'm just doing it on the video so you can kind of see where I'm pointing, and so that I can record it again for the kids that are at home. So, first of all, what you see on your paper is similar stuff that you saw in your stations that you did the last couple days. This is a chemical equation for photosynthesis. So much like in math, equations can be written in science using letters and numbers to represent atoms and the amounts of those atoms. So for example, right here we've got water, H2O. I'm sure you know what H2O is for how many years now. CO2, carbon dioxide. Plants, as you learned in your stations, and as you learned probably in like 3rd or 4th grade or something, photosynthesis happens in plants. Plants absorb carbon dioxide, they absorb water, they use the water and carbon dioxide to form a chemical reaction. That chemical reaction produces their quote unquote food. It produces glucose molecules. Really, really simple form of sugar, which is what is on the right hand side of your little placemat here, C6H12O6. Now, the word sugar is actually a term that kind of covers a big group of different types of carbohydrates. If you remember back to the one video in the stations, they were talking about carbohydrates specifically containing carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. The term sugar refers to a category of carbohydrates. So let's talk about this real quick. If you've ever looked at the back of a food package, and I know it's a little blurry on my camera, but if you ever looked at one of these things, these statistics are showing you the breakdown of energy that is contained in the food in the bag. All right, so for example, the calorie number, it's telling me 160 calories if I eat 1 serving of this, which is the whole bag of these chips. 160 is the amount of scientific energy, the amount of calories that I'm going to get out of the food that's in this package. So when my body digests this food and breaks it down, like we'll talk about in a little bit, it will provide me with energy to do things. I need energy to talk. I need energy to walk. I need energy to breathe. I need energy to do everything in my life. You're provided with 160 calories of energy. Your food contains 3 different molecules that give you energy, and that's what's listed at the bottom here. And again, I know it's kind of fuzzy in the video here. The first number listed here is fat, so you can break down fat molecules and get energy out of them. The next one down here is carbohydrates. You can break down carbohydrates and get energy out of them. And the third one is proteins. You can break down proteins and get energy out of them. And each of those different molecules, those three main molecules, will give you different amounts of energy. But the important thing is carbohydrates, like in the video, carbohydrate, carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, just like sugar. So sugar, glucose, is a very simple form of a carbohydrate. So when we eat things that contain glucose, we can get energy out of them, which is what we'll talk about on the back side of this placemat in a little bit, called cellular respiration. All right, so make sure you're on the photosynthesis side of your mat. Let's talk about these numbers. So again, much like in math, this is an equation. So let's say in math, I wrote an equation that says 5x plus 3x equals 28. Totally just made up those numbers. But this is an equation you've solved probably in Mrs. Straub's room already this year. You've been doing these kinds of things, I know. The number in front of the letter, called the coefficient, it tells you how many of the variable you have, correct? In science, it works exactly the same way. We've got numbers out in front of our molecules that tell us how many of those molecules that we have. So in this case, it's telling us we've got H2O, that's water. We have 6 of those things. Okay. The other important number is the subscript. Subscripts are the little numbers at the bottom of the line. You see one in water, you see one in carbon dioxide, you see them in glucose. Those numbers tell me how much of each atom is present. So in the case of H2O, there are 2 hydrogen atoms. And if there's no number, just like in math, we always assume it's a 1, correct? And the same thing goes for coefficients. Glucose over here doesn't have a coefficient. So we just assume that it means 1. And we're not going to write it because we don't need to. All right. In carbon dioxide, again, there's no coefficient for carbon, so we assume it's a 1. So it's 1 carbon bonded with 2 oxygen atoms. Do those numbers make sense so far? All right. So basically our chemical equation is saying if we take these things and combine them with these things, and we use some energy that we get from the sun, it's going to yield, it's going to produce these things. Same with your math equation. If I take these amount of numbers and combine them with these numbers, they will produce, they will equal what's over here. Make sense so far? Yes, ma'am.
So it's saying you need 6 water atoms, or 6 water molecules, 6 carbon dioxide molecules, energy.
Nailed it. Yep, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to build these molecules here in a second. The other important thing I need to tell you about is this yields. It is not an equal sign because these two sides are not necessarily equal. The stuff on the left side of the equation is always going to produce the stuff that's on the right. But you'll notice the stuff that's on the left are different things than what's on the right. If you've ever made chocolate chip cookies using the Nestle Toll House chocolate chip cookie recipe, it's on the back of the bag. It's going to list the ingredients there. It's going to give you some instructions. And at the bottom, it's going to say yields 2 dozen cookies. Yields is simply meaning produces or creates or generates, however you want to say it. So basically what this chemical equation is saying is the stuff that's on the left is going to produce, it's going to yield this amount of stuff on the right. Or maybe you farm and your seed says it's going to yield so many bushels of that crop. Same idea. We start with these ingredients and it yields this end product. Good so far. Fantastic. So let's make a chemical equation. All right. Oh, here's another important thing that I forgot to tell first period, I believe. Water and carbon dioxide. Let's do it this way. Here's an equation. 5x plus 3x equals 28. If I wrote it as 3x plus 5x equals 28, have I changed it? No. Means exactly the same thing, right? Same thing goes for chemical equations. These two could be switched so long as they're on the left side of that equation. Does that make sense? This energy could be over here. Basically, the products just have to be included. Now, when you get into higher level chemistries, chemistry classes, there will be an order that you put them in, but we are not concerned with that whatsoever right now. Okay? All right, so let's build some molecules. First molecule we're going to build is water. It says take 2 hydrogen atoms and bond it with 1 oxygen atom. So we've got hydrogen is purple, so I'm going to take 2 purple tutti fruttis, aka hydrogen atoms, and I'm going to bond them together with 1 oxygen, which is green. And I'm just going to set them on my mat like that. You can stack them if you want, as long as they're together somehow. So that is a water molecule that I just built. What? It is purple. Purple and green. Purple and green. So we need 2 purple hydrogen and 1 green oxygen. Yeah, the color's kind of hard to see on the screen. Now, our equation says, the coefficient tells us we should have 6 of those. So I'm going to build more of that molecule. There's 2 of them. And I'm going to keep doing this. As long as they're on the left side of your mat, you're going to have to squeeze stuff in here anyway. So just make sure they're on the left side of your mat and build 6. So I've now built 6 water molecules, which is not a lot of water. It's not even a drop of water. So we're talking about this at the very, very small molecular scale. Plants are going to absorb liters or gallons of water, depending on the plant. Okay. We also need carbon dioxide, CO2. So 1 carbon, which is red, combined with 2 oxygen, which is green. So CO2. There is 1. My coefficient tells me I need 6 of those. So let's build those molecules until we have 6 of them. And you'll notice this will use up all of the materials that we had set aside. And again, just shove them in there on your mat somewhere. Make sure they're on the left-hand side, though. All right, I've got all of my reactants built. So the stuff on the left-hand side of the equation, it's called the reactants. The stuff on the right-hand side of the equation are called the products. Reactants because we're reacting them in a chemical reaction. Products because that's what it's producing. Questions so far? All right, next important part. We've got our raw materials. Plants are absorbing water, they're absorbing the carbon dioxide, and then the chlorophyll is going to be absorbing energy from the sun. And inside the chloroplast, where all these things are starting to get gathered, inside the chloroplast, where this photosynthesis is going to be happening, the energy from the sun is going to be used to start ripping these molecules apart and rearranging them into something new. In other words, a chemical reaction is going to happen. Now, here's something very, 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 very important. These atoms aren't just held together by themselves. Something holds them together. It's called chemical energy, in short. That's a simple 7th grade term we're going to use. Chemical energy hold these together. All right. Now, when you break these apart, it's going to release some energy. Okay, so whenever you break apart a molecule, the energy that's holding them together, almost like the glue that's holding them together, when you break that bond apart, it releases energy. So when you put molecules together, it requires energy to stick together. So this sunlight energy is going to be used to break these apart and rearrange the atoms into new stuff. That new stuff is what's on the right-hand side of our placemat. All right, so let's go ahead and we're going to break apart our molecules and they're going to get rearranged into some atom soup. And they're going to get rearranged in this chemical reaction. Oh, I know, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So what I just did, what I'm representing here with this mound of garbage This is a chemical reaction happening, and this chemical reaction is going to produce the things over here. So I'm going to first build my oxygen molecules. The oxygen in the air around you right now is not just singular oxygen atoms. It's actually atoms of oxygen that are bonded with one another in a molecule called O2. So it's two oxygen atoms. So let's go and find that. They're green. Take two oxygen atoms, bond them together. Yes, ma'am. Nice. All right, so I built one oxygen molecule. That's the O2. I need 6 of them. Yes. Yeah. So people, I took in this chemical reaction, these oxygen atoms get ripped away from the carbon dioxide and they get kind of, the carbon gets joined with the water to form some other stuff. So here we've got oxygen atoms, oxygen molecules, sorry, 6 of them. And what's left, C6H12O6, let's build that. So one, and now listen, this is not going to look like anything. It's just going to be a bunch of blob of stuff sitting together. It's not really what it looks like. It's just a representation. So I need 6 carbon. So I need 6 red. And I'm just going to kind of line mine up like this. And then it says H12. So 12 hydrogen, which are purple. So start adding those. Okay, so there's my hydrogen. And then we need 6 oxygen. Okay, now, shh, hey folks, please stop talking. What you should notice is all the stuff we started with is now gone, and it has become new stuff. It's no longer water, it's no longer carbon dioxide. Now it's oxygen molecules and a sugar molecule. Yes, ma'am. Yep. Yep. So we took flour and sugar and salt and chocolate chips and blah, blah, blah. We baked them in the oven for a while and they popped out as something different than they went in. They came out as cookies. So we started with these raw materials on the left. We got some energy from the sun and they turned into some new ingredients, basically new stuff. But here's the really important part. Conservation of matter. Really important concept in chemistry. The stuff you start with has to be the same as the stuff you end with. Not the compounds, not the molecules are the same, but the number of atoms are the same. They're just rearranged in a new order. So the stuff and that's why we don't have anything left on the left-hand side. There's no atoms left because they all got bonded together as something new.
On the left side, you could have like 2 hydrogen, 1 oxygen, and then on the right side, it could be 2 oxygen.
No, you always have to have the same things. So we started with 6 carbon, 18 oxygen, and 12 hydrogen on the left. Well, it's the same stuff we ended with. Whoops. It's the same stuff it's the same stuff we ended with. They're just joined together in a different way. So there's still 6 carbon, there's still 18 oxygen, and there's still 12 hydrogen. They're just in different forms over here. Shh. It's the same concept, yeah. All right. Good? Now. Huh? No? Okay. Give me a few minutes then. All right, great. Plants are doing this. Why are plants doing this? Well, they're doing it for two reasons. Number one, they can now use this glucose molecule, break it apart in cellular respiration, which we'll talk about in a minute, and get the energy out of it. You guys okay back there? Here's something that people don't understand. Plants don't do photosynthesis to get energy. They do photosynthesis to make sugar. They still have to break that sugar down to get the energy out of it, though. So plants just don't automatically get energy from the sun. They get the opportunity to store energy as sugar and then break it down in cellular respiration. The other thing plants can do with this glucose molecule is use it to build their structures, their cell structures, basically. The one video you watched was talking about how plants can use something called cellulose to hold themselves up. So they showed like the celery stalk and how it doesn't get blown over by the wind because it's sturdy. Think about a tree. Think about like the wood of a tree. It's not soft. It doesn't fall over. It's got a lot of that cellulose. Now, what plants do is they take these glucose molecules, which are actually very simple molecules, they clump them together into bigger, more complex things, and those bigger, more complex molecules builds their cells and builds their cellulose structures and gives them sturdiness, basically. Okay, so they're using these both for energy and for building themselves, the same way that you use your food. You ready to get mad at me?
Yes.
All right, so
I've been ready.
plants have now absorbed water, they've absorbed carbon dioxide, they've done a chemical reaction and produced sugar and oxygen. They give this oxygen off to the atmosphere. They keep some of it for themselves to do the process we're going to talk about in a moment, and they store this sugar in their bodies, in their structures. Clear your mat off. Flip it over.
Oh my goodness. I am so mad at you. No. What?
Now, cellular respiration. Cellular respiration happens in, believe it or not, cells. I know.
No, I thought it happened in chairs. I thought it was in chairs.
Okay? Cellular respiration happens in all of your body's cells. So your body, you eat this bag of chips. Yum. Your stomach and the rest of your digestive system starts to break that stuff down. The molecules of fat and carbohydrates and proteins, they get absorbed into your bloodstream. They get taken to your cells. Your mitochondria absorbs them, breaks them down into these glucose molecules. Glucose molecules are really easy for your body to break apart in this cellular respiration process. So let's look at this one. Beginning with sugar molecule and oxygen molecule. Hey, I'm eating food to get sugar. I'm breathing to get oxygen. So let's build these things. 602. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 602. Hey, this is the same stuff we just finished with in photosynthesis. The stuff that are the end products of photosynthesis are the beginning products of cellular respiration. So once I've got my oxygen, I know that the rest of the stuff in my atoms clump together to form one molecule of sugar. So you don't really need, no, it's not actually what it looks like, but that's how many atoms are in it. And this, now let me clarify too, I had a conversation with somebody about this yesterday. Oh, bummer. The sugar that we're talking about here, this glucose molecule, is a very basic, simple form of sugar. The sugar that we were using yesterday, like for our yeast production, that was like table sugar. That's a bunch of glucose molecules bonded together into a bigger sugar molecule. No. Glucose is not sweet. It's actually very bitter if you were to taste pure glucose. So this is a very basic, simple molecule. Yes, sir. You sure can. I mean, it's glucose, probably. I don't know what kind of liquid sugar you're talking about, but
it's like the really thick stuff that I thought was glucose.
Corn syrup?
Is that the same
I don't
thing?
know. Cairo syrup?
Is that the same thing? Is that
It's
just
all forms of sugar start with glucose, and then the glucose bonds together to form bigger things. Different forms of sugar. It's a solid dissolved essentially in water. Yeah. Yeah. Yep. Yeah. All right.
Oh goodness. Good
Why, you
luck.
trying to con some people out of some Fruit Loops or what? All right, so we've got our oxygen that we breathed in. We've got our sugar that we got from our food. Our body is going to do something called oxidation. Have you ever seen rust before? Okay, rust forms when iron, metal, and oxygen atoms in the atmosphere chemically join together to form something new. It's called iron oxide. It's the orange rusty stuff that you're looking at. You don't have to have water for it to work. Water speeds up the process, but water does not make the process happen. It's oxygen bonding with iron oxide.
Well, how come you're like you literally take a car outside and it does rust in it?
It does not, no rust forms in a day. It takes time. It's a slow process. Now, this process is very much like rust, but instead of oxygen bonding with metal, it's going to bond with this glucose molecule. When these oxygen atoms come over here to this glucose molecule, it tries to bond with the carbon. Oh, look, carbon dioxide. I just made a carbon dioxide molecule. I'm going to do that 6 times. So go ahead and start building your carbon dioxide molecules again. It sure is. And again, when you're building your molecules, just make sure they end up on the correct side of your placemat. It doesn't really matter where they are there, as long as they're on the correct side. You'll have room for it. Make it work. All right, so my chemical reaction inside the respiration. So inside of every cell in your body, you've got the mitochondria. And in your mitochondria, your body is taking the oxygen you're breathing in, it's combining it with these glucose molecules, it's breaking them apart, it's forming a chemical bond, and it's releasing that energy. And we'll talk more about that in a second. In that process, it forms these other products. It forms carbon dioxide and it forms water. So we need 6 H2O molecules. So H2O, a water molecule. And we need 6 of them. And once again, you should notice when you get done building these molecules, you won't have anything left on the left-hand side of your mat. Very surprising, isn't it? Yeah.
They're so cute.
Anyway,
I can't find it.
now, why are we doing this? Why is this process happening? Well, your body needs energy, right? And the only way to get energy is by eating food. This is your body's way of releasing that energy that was originally stored during photosynthesis. So remember we talked about these glucose molecules and how in order for things to bond together, something has to make them stick like glue, basically. It's energy. So literally these carbon atoms and these hydrogen and oxygen atoms, they are stuck together because there is energy holding them, forcing them to stay together. If we somehow break those bonds apart, it releases that energy. And that's what we're getting over here on the right-hand side of our placemat inside the respiration. Now, it's much more complicated than just, hey, you get energy out of it. You actually get energy to make another molecule called ATP. I'm not going to get into that. ATP is a molecule called adenosine triphosphate.
That's too big.
Correct, which is why we're not talking about it. This will be a big time topic in biology when you get to high school. Okay? For our purposes in 7th grade, we're just going to call it energy. So in the cellular respiration process, we break these glucose bonds and we get energy in the process. And that energy is then used by your cells to do things, to move, to breathe, to walk, to talk, to think. Everything you do requires energy. This is where it's coming from. It's coming from that cellular respiration process after you're done digesting your food. You're doing this right now. And this is why, and I kind of mentioned it in the notes the other day, if you don't have oxygen, you can't do cellular respiration. If you can't do cellular respiration, you don't have energy. If you don't have energy, you're dead. And this is why people suffocate. I mean, this is what ends up with suffocation. It's not that you can't get the oxygen, it's that you can't do cellular respiration and you don't have energy for anything else to work. So that's why you need the oxygen in the first place. Okay? Now, our body then, the whole point of this is to get this energy out. We don't need the carbon dioxide, so we breathe that out. We don't need the water, so we sweat it out, we breathe it out through water vapor, we pee it out. It gets out of our body. We don't need it anymore. Here's the cool part. Check it out. Plants need that stuff. They need water. They need carbon dioxide. So the stuff that we are giving off, they can take in and use it again. And then check it out. The stuff that they create is the stuff that we use. And that's what that one video was all about. Okay, now, hey people, chill. They do. That's where I was going next. Okay, really, 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 really important that you listen to this. All living things do cellular respiration. Every living thing does cellular respiration. We have to eat food to do cellular respiration. Plants, they don't eat. So what do? They make their own glucose molecules. And then once they have their glucose molecules, they can use them in cellular respiration. So if you remember back to Mr. Zimley's class last year, when you were comparing plant and animal cells, the difference is two things: a cell wall and chloroplasts, right? The cell wall gives them structure. The chloroplast lets them do photosynthesis. One thing they had in common, though, was they both have mitochondria. Mitochondria is where this cellular respiration is happening.
Wait, really?
Yes,
Is it powerhouse inside?
sure is.
I cannot believe a lady thought she could live it.
Right. There's actually groups of people that believe that, and it's crazy.
They're also like, they also
Yeah, but
call it-
she also lost 30 pounds because and this is what we were talking about, I think maybe last week or 2 weeks ago. If you go without food for a while, you're fine because your body's going to go and find fat that you've stored and start breaking that down. And then your body's going to go find proteins in your muscles and start breaking that down. And then your body's going to start breaking down your internal organs and using them for energy. And that's how you starve. So she literally was starving herself to death. She had to stop because she was going to die if not. Yeah, in the podcast. Yeah. They're still gonna do cellular respiration. They're gonna do this anaerobic respiration. And we didn't get into this. So aerobic respiration, this is what we do typically. We breathe oxygen and we go through this. Now, when you are doing heavy amounts of exercise and your body cannot get enough oxygen, your body will kick into this anaerobic method. You don't need to worry about these. I just put them in there because they talked about them in some of the videos and I wanted you to know what those words meant. And the one video, it was the like every breath video or whatever it was called, where it had the split screen. That's what this is. One screen was showing photosynthesis, the other screen was showing cellular respiration. Shh. Those products turn into these reactants. These products turn into these reactants, and they go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. We are part of this. It's called the carbon cycle. Our carbon atoms just keep getting used over and over again. Plants use them, you eat them, you breathe them out. Plants use them, you eat them, you breathe them out. And this goes back into that whole "you are what you eat" kind of thing. Your body is taking food and it's breaking it down for energy, but it's also breaking it down and actually using it to build your cells.